If you could name a ship after yourself, what kind of ship would it be?
What kind of ship?
Would it be like an icebreaker or something?
An icebreaker? A dinghy? I'm a marine scientist by education, and I do know there are some quite famous research ships that are named after some people. That would be nice, wouldn't it? But I wouldn't qualify for that.
So can you tell us a little bit more about yourself? Your first step into the maritime world was in the Royal Navy.
I joined the Navy because I'd read in the back of a Sunday paper back in sometime in the middle of the 80s about these opportunities to travel the world. And I always was very curious. I wanted to leave where I lived in the north of England and was dead keen to see what was out there. I joined the Navy when I was 18 as a university cadet. I did a year of basic training and then I went off to university where I studied oceanography, the science of the sea, the physics, the chemistry, the biology of the ocean. And that was fantastic. You know, I was a naval officer at university. Before then, heading back to sea, went to 54 countries in total. I visited every continent. But then at the end of my 20s, I decided, okay, I've done 10 years effectively. So that's when I left going to sea. But I still miss it, if I'm honest. Going to sea is great. I'm playing with big bits of kit, big toys.
And presumably in the Navy you had quite a lot of responsibility. It was your first kind of leadership role. So do you think that it sort of shaped your leadership style now?
It's a good question because, I mean, we have this conversation, sort of friends who I joined up with. Are you a particular type of person which lends you then to join the military, in this case the Navy, or do you learn what you do in the Navy and become, what you are? And I think it's a bit of both, to be honest. But there's no doubt that the leadership training that you get provided is quite significant and it's very important. But the strange thing is you don't really know you're learning it. And that's, I guess, just the way that they do it. You're actually in it, doing it, being guided. So I think it's very effective. And of course, the things you learn do become applicable. And actually, one thing on that is a question, because I have worked in the forces. I've worked in the civil service. I've worked in the private sector. I've also worked in the so-called third sector, the non-government sector. And people say, well, are they very different? And the actual answer is, no, they're not. They're slightly different in terms of why they're constructed and what their overall roles are, of course. But actually, it all comes down to people. It all comes down to engaging and getting teams together to get something done effectively, efficiently, and hopefully, along the way, having some fun.
And were there any sort of people that you would consider a role model or that you just admired particularly?
I haven't got any specific names, but yeah, there are characters along the way, both good and bad. And you look at someone and say, yeah, I really like the way they've done that. I remember that. But equally, there's people along the way you think, that was awful. I never want to be like that. And in some ways, those people are probably more educational because it probably steers you more. That's exactly how I don't want to do it. But the key to all of this is you can't copy someone else's style. You've got to be authentic. You've got to do it your own way. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. It's my privilege to lead BIMCO. I've been here 4.5 years. And the way I describe it to friends and family, or if I'm at a barbecue, is that it's the largest ship owning association. And what we do is represent 2/3 of the world's fleet by deadweight tonnage and over 2,000 members in 130 countries in things relating to getting their businesses done. And the essence of that is creating a contractual framework to allow that to happen. Essentially with a practical voice of shipping, there to help de-risk our members' businesses.
What does that actually mean to you when you say that BIMCO is the practical voice of shipping?
It's about providing services, tools, information, education that help business work, basically. That's the key. Where can I find this information? Oh, well, I'll go on the BIMCO website and see if I can find it. And that's them engaging with us on the website. And alternatively, we're pushing them information as well. We think you might need to know this. Here's a newsletter. Here's a bit of advice. Here's a training course, which we think will help you do your business. It's got to be something useful. There's a lot of organisations in this space, and it's a very crowded and complicated picture. But the way I would differentiate BIMCO is that we also provide a lot of very practical services and things that we can do on a daily basis to help our members. So for example, we have a help desk, a contractual advice help desk. So when people are working up charter parties and they've got some questions that they don't quite understand, they can pick up the phone to the team here in Copenhagen and say, I've got this problem, can you give me some advice? The Secretariat are the people that are facilitating this, and there are a bunch of experts that we have, and they're great. I mean, some people would say they're nerds, and I mean that in a very nice way. But we have world experts made up of 23 different nationalities. It's sometimes quite challenging to lead an organisation which is so varied and diverse in its views. But at the same time, when you get to the answer is always better because you've got more views, more experience, more ideas. So it gives me a lot of confidence that I have a team, an excellent team, that can deliver pretty much anything. But actually the key to what we do is our volunteers. And we have over 500 people working for BIMCO in a voluntary capacity, probably on a weekly basis. They're engaged in subcommittees, on sounding boards, on task forces and alliances, etc. They're helping to get a particular job done. And so without them, BIMCO would not be what it is today. It's the real lifeblood of the organisation. A member organisation which is built of its members and represented by its members, facilitated by the Secretariat. And we have members in every single sector of shipping, and that's not an exaggeration. So that breadth is fantastic because you get that diversity of thought, you get these different opinions. You literally can leave no stone unturned when you're worrying a problem and trying to come up with an effective solution. One of the challenges with that is how do you get that common voice? How do you actually get everybody to agree this is the right approach? Because we think about shipping in a very homogenous way. Oh, it's shipping. But actually, if you drill down into what shipping really is, the businesses are very different. The business models are very different. So it's not a one size fits all. To actually get a single voice is very hard. So the way we go about that process to try and come to that single voice is quite lengthy. It does take some time because consensus is a very difficult thing to achieve, and we're quite skilled at that. Of course, there can be some very robust and difficult conversations within that, but the overall aim of doing it that way is that then we can ultimately create a position, and we write our positions down, we make them public. So there's a lot of work involved in that, but I've seen other ways of doing it, but I generally do think this is the best way of approaching it. And I think the other key here is that we don't create a position and then stick it on the back of the fridge and not tell anybody about it. We are very public and very open about the positions that the BIMCO organisation and its members essentially are taking. And I think that's really important. I think it's a way of demonstrating and providing global leadership in what is a very important but also very complex sector. Our core business is creating contracts and clauses and solutions to make sure the contractual framework exists so shipping can do its business. But to do that, we need to understand what the regulations are going to be. So the way we approach regulators is with a view to saying, we're not going to tell you what it is you need to regulate or how you should regulate or what the answer should be, but let us explain to you what your thoughts are, and if you're thinking about doing this, what the impact will be on trade, on whatever it might be. And so that's the role. We're consultants, we're advisors, we're educators. We're trying to explain to the regulators, if you do this, we think this will be the likely outcome. And in doing that, hopefully help them reach a better solution so our members can carry on trading.
Could you tell us a little bit more about BIMCO's efforts on the ship recycling agenda?
It's very pertinent because our shipping market analysts here in Copenhagen estimate that some 15,000 ships are going to require recycling in the next decade. And that's massive. And if you look at the available capacity around the world to do that, that's going to be very, very interesting. Because, of course, decisions to recycle are based on market dynamics, they're market driven, but they're also compliance driven. And as the onslaught of environmental regulations continues, there are going to be some ship retirement and investment decisions that will be made, which will then add to it. And it would be nice, wouldn't it, if that was done in a measured, sort of linear way, but the likelihood is it won't. It'll arrive in a wave, and there'll be a bunch of ships that need recycling at the same time. So that's why BIMCO is involved in this now. It's very topical and it's extremely important, not just in terms of being able to retire safely and environmentally soundly these ships and recycle them, but also in terms of the contribution those ships can make in the circular economy, and then particularly in South Asia. They rely massively heavily. Their GDP, their growth as countries relies massively on this recycled steel that comes from the ships. And on the 26th of June this year, 26th of June 2025, the Hong Kong Convention comes into force, which means at that point ships will need to be using Hong Kong compliant yards so that ships are recycled in a safe and environmentally sound way. So we established at the back end of last year a ship recycling alliance, which is made up of the main recycling states, the recycling associations there. And using that as the core, we're now adding ship owners and other key interested parties to help us work out how we can deal with some of the challenges. For example, the inconsistency between the Hong Kong Convention and the Basel Convention on the transboundary shipment of hazardous wastes. So a lot to do, and one of the first things that the Alliance needs to deliver and get across and prepare for, I should probably say, is the Basel COP, hopefully get a good outcome from, but a huge amount of other things going on at the same time.
Another campaign that is important to BIMCO, and I guess to you too as an ex-seafarer, is the protection of seafarers. What's your objectives there?
Yeah, well, I mean, 90% of everything is transported by sea. They are that important to every single one of us. And so this is all about the seafarers. And as you quite rightly say, I'm an ex-seafarer, so I feel a certain affinity to this. I mean, I've worked in that environment. I've got a little bit of an understanding of what that all means. And fair treatment of seafarers is crucial. I mean, just think back to the pandemic. I mean, we had situations where we couldn't get crews to their ships and we couldn't get crews back from their ships to their families. And that is just shocking that was allowed to happen. Countries were very happy to take the pharmacy goods, the medical supplies, the food, the energy that the seafarers delivered, but they wouldn't let them go home or join their ships. So one of the things we've been doing with the other international associations is to push for essential worker status, key worker status for seafarers, because they need to be recognised like everybody else. It's very important for organisations such as BIMCO to be pushing on this, leaning on governments, leaning on regional bodies to really try and keep that seafarer importance high in the mind of everybody, because we rely on them so much. The geopolitical situation is quite worrying, and we've had seafarers murdered in the southern Red Sea, going about their daily business and getting hit by a missile while just doing their jobs in freedom of navigation. So I mean, that is shocking. That someone in this day and age can be just going about their lawful business, doing a job on behalf of the planet, and they get taken out by a missile. There's no way that should happen. These sorts of things are areas where BIMCO can at least lend its voice and its support and its empathy to try and improve a situation. There are some issues around the criminalisation of seafarers, around them getting caught in some organised crime, etc., that I think maybe we can do some more advocacy for our seafarers. That's where the BIMCO brand, the global reach, I think can have some, or hold some sway and have some impact.
Okay, so this year, 2025, BIMCO celebrates its 120th anniversary. So how has BIMCO stayed relevant all that time, and is it going to still be here in another 120 years?
Well, I've not been here for 120 years. I just want to sort of make that point. I've only been here for 4.5 years, but it is amazing, isn't it, that an organisation can survive that long. I remember reading a McKinsey report explaining that most organisations survive for about 17 years. The founders think of an idea, it sort of grows and it sort of develops, etc., and then it kind of plateaus and it's doing a good job for a while, and then it doesn't rethink, it doesn't reinvent itself, it loses its relevance and then it dies. So it's this natural sort of life cycle of organisations. And then you've got an organisation like BIMCO that has been here literally for 120 years, over a century, and it's managed to maintain its relevance through world wars, through pandemics, through other geopolitical crises. I mean, how do organisations do that? And so I find that fascinating, and it's why running this organisation is a real privilege, and also it's a real responsibility. What I am always thinking about is how does BIMCO maintain that relevance to make sure that we're going to be there in the next 120 years, and that's really what I think about. What I task my leadership team with is, what do we need to do next? Let's not sit back on our laurels and say, well, yeah, we make the best standard contracts and clauses in the world. They're world class. Yes, they are. But actually, what happens tomorrow if something changes? What happens tomorrow if contracts and clauses in the way they're currently done aren't done like that in the future? And we could be sitting there fat, dumb and happy as BIMCO saying, yeah, but we're great, but the world's moved. So that's something that does drive me. That gets me out of bed in the morning. What's next? How do we maintain our relevance? Because I absolutely want to see that BIMCO will be here in another 120 years. We're just really lucky. I mean, shipping is just an incredible industry. It's global. Everything that happens in the world, whether it be geopolitical or from a climate perspective, has an impact on shipping. And we have to be in a position to respond to it, to maintain that and to keep shipping where it is and to keep doing the amazing job that it does today. We're going to need some great people. It's a people business, absolutely. And we've got to make sure then we're attracting the new talent, the youngsters of today, to say, come and work in shipping, because actually you can be whatever you want to be in shipping, and we need you. We need these bright ideas, we need these new solutions, and because there are some grand challenges out there. There's no point in shying away from that, but let's get in there and get on with it, because you can have an extremely rewarding and fulfilling career in shipping. So I commend it to everybody, and I say that sort of 37 years in, and I can't believe 37 years is when I first started and joined the Royal Navy. But there we are. That just shows how old I am.